What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Dr. Loren Olson. Loren, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Michael. This is a subject that is dear to my heart for a number of reasons. I'm a father and a grandfather. I've been divorced from my wife for almost 40 years now, but we still remain friends. And I'm pleased to say that. I was divorced in 1986, first in my family to be divorced. And it was not easy to get through that time. And I struggled for a number of years to recover from that, both financially and emotionally. And then I'm also a psychiatrist. I've been practicing now for over 50 years, and I'm still working. In 1986, after I was divorced, I came out as gay. I initially thought all I wanted was a blowjob, and I didn't know that I was gay. And so I was totally shocked by the whole thing when I fell in love with a man. That was not anticipated. Doug and I have been together now for 37 years. And he and I went through a near divorce as well. We both were going through a tough time where we kind of pulled apart from each other and ended up both of us having an affair with somebody else. And had to, I think we were both not looking for a new relationship, but looking for a part of ourselves that was missing during that time. And we had to kind of learn to forgive each other for all of that and move on to be able to stay in our relationship. And fortunately, we've been able to do that. I'm also a writer. I think we connected through Psychology Today. I write a number of things there, and actually, I'm approaching 2 million readers on Psychology Today. So
Wow.
I'm kind of pleased about that. I have a couple books that I've written as well. One I published about a year ago called No More Neckties, and then an earlier one about called Finally Out, about coming out midlife. And as I said, I'm 80 years old, but I still work. But the nice part is I can work where and when I want to, and I'm not driven by production demands anymore. And so I focus on my doing some work. I'm actually planning to work in New Zealand for 3 months coming up. I have a contract with that, so I can work where and when I want to, which is really part of the advantages of getting old. And I still do the writing, and then I continue to work on a relationship with Doug and my family and friends. And that's about it. I guess I'm lucky to be where I am at 80 years old, and feel good about that.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a lot to that intro. Thank you for it, first of all. Some of it I wasn't aware of, quite honestly, mostly the divorce stuff. I did, read your blog, a couple of your blogs, but I didn't, dive in and read every single thing. So some of it is a bit of a surprise. I don't think I could have forgot, because I forget shit all the time. I don't think I was aware that you went through a divorce. So it's good that you had that perspective. I think my audience really respects that, because they know that if you haven't been through it, you don't understand. And so thus, if you have, you clearly do. But what brought me to you was an article you wrote about how men need to be better at socializing, how we need to, in order to save our own lives, essentially, is we need to be better at building and maintaining friendships with other men. So I kind of want to dive into that topic in a general sense. And I want to start with something that it's a phrase that you mentioned: women grieve and men replace. And I think it was under the sort of guise of widows
um, if, how the different genders handle a widow or a spouse passing. But I think I've noticed this myself, being in a running a Facebook group where there are over 7,000 men in there that are going through divorce. And I see a lot. I can't speak to what women do, but I see a lot of men that try to replace. I know that I did it myself. I tried to plug and play. Tried to find the next wife as quickly as I could. Luckily, I smartened up somewhere before getting serious with this one particular person. But why do you do that? Why do men do that? Why do we seek to replace and not actually agree and thus heal?
I think a lot of it has to do, Mike, with the idea that we tend to put all of our emotional energy in the relationship with one person. And when that one person is removed from our life, whether that's a good or a bad relationship, we're sometimes we're left with nothing. And so oftentimes, because of that loneliness that sets in, we seek someone else who can become that someone special who serves every need in our lives. And a lot of us men in particular really don't relate emotionally very well to other people. And so we tend to focus on that one single relationship, and then we're left very much alone.
Is that so that speaks to essentially that we really do lean on women for our emotional well-being. Is
I
that
think, yeah,
is that is that innate? Is that like why is that? Like why? Because I don't disagree with you. But why is that? What makes that mechanism happen or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily innate, but it's certainly the way we're cultured. Men are told not to show any vulnerability, not show any weakness, and so oftentimes our relationships with men are more competitive, and somewhat times adversarial. And so the last thing we're going to do, I think, is show any vulnerability. And of course, if you look back at the animal kingdom in other ways, certainly the males in those situations aren't going to show any vulnerability either. And I think in many ways there is an element of it that is innate, but a lot of it is the way we're socialized.
I think it makes me sad, number one, and number two, I think there's a whole host of things there to mind, but I think one of the things that really comes up for me is, well, how do we change that? Can we change it? Maybe is the first question. Can we change it? How do we do?
Yes, I think we can change it, and I'm sure that many of the people who are in your group and who are listening to your podcast are men who are seeking out that connection with other men and who are wanting to allow themselves to be vulnerable in a space that's safe for them to do so. So it lacks that competitiveness, the need to get ahead of each other, and allows for the space, a safe space to show vulnerability. I heard from a guy recently who had gone to his first AA meeting very early in the process of recovery, and he said he was shocked to realize that men there talked about their feelings. He'd never had that experience in his entire life, and I think many of us go through life in that way of not having that time when we really connect to someone on a deeply personal level without fear of judgment.
Yeah, you talk about that in this blog post, and I didn't write down, well, you could recall it off the top of your head, but I didn't write down the number of hours. But there is, and I'd love, you give me data, baby. I love, you tell me what I have to do, and at least I have a target for what I have to do. But there is a certain number of hours that you get you to being a close friend with someone. You remember what those are? I totally don't.
Yeah, the hours are 90 hours for friendship, 200 hours for a close personal friendship. And that's a lot of time to devote to relationship. And therefore, it limits the number of people that we can have on that very inner circle and it takes a lot of time to nurture and maintain those relationships too. And when we're pulled away from that time, with other men, we lose track of those relationships, and many men, particularly, I don't know how old you are, but probably about your age, begin to pull away from the relationships because you're focusing on your career. You perhaps have children. You have all these things that are demands on your time, and so you don't have time to nurture those relationships with other men. And oftentimes, that's what happens with the way that men are losing their social connections.
Yeah, it's clearly challenging, right? It's not like I don't want, and I think sometimes maybe I'm guilty of this, sort of painting men in a negative light, even though I am one. But I don't want men to think like, it's really easy, just get around other men. But it's really hard because if you're talking about 90 and then 200 hours, that's a serious time commitment, and that's in the challenging corporate America work environment where we're expected to be on 24. I got a leash right here, this company phone,
Yep.
right? It's really hard to do that. This is difficult stuff, right? We're not talking like there are no quick fixes.
No, there aren't. I think, and not every relationship has to be one where you sit around and talk about feelings. But the time of just hanging out with other men, as I mentioned in the article, is slow time.
Yes.
When you're fishing or you're playing sports together, you're going to the out to drink. There are a number of ways that we can do that where we're not really focusing on talking about feelings in the depth that we really need to talk about. That kind of thing can happen with only a very limited number of people, but we still need those other social connections of people that we spend time with. I like the phrase slow time because it's just a matter of stepping outside of the world we have and doing whatever you do, but doing it with somebody else.
So, but those close connections, how many is feasible? And again, I like data, and I know it's probably 3.2 people or whatever. But like, what's ideal? Like, how many close friends should you have that you devote those cumulative 200 hours?
I think it would be wonderful if each of us could have at least 3 friends. I think it's pretty much impossible to have more than 6 friends in that category of somebody you can call up and say, "Hey, I'm hurting. I need to talk to you about something. Let's go out together." We just don't have time to maintain a big circle of friends. And I think in the days of social media, we have a lot of contacts. We don't have a real lot of friends.
I think in some ways, perhaps social media exacerbates that because it maybe feels like you have those connections, but they're just hollow, I would say, in a lot of ways. And I'm not like just dismissing those folks that I am friendly with on social media, because there are some people that's the only way that I communicate with them, good, bad, or different. And I think good, because at least I'm communicating with them in some way, in terms of if they're in states away or countries away, at least I'm staying somewhat connected. But I do think sometimes I find myself on my phone waiting for the world to reach out and grab me, and it's not going to. But I think that's right. I think that's kind of what we all sort of hope for.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And we do get those messages. You're beautiful. I'm in love with you. That kind of thing from somebody you've never heard of before.
Sure.
And it's tempting to believe that. And I do think there is value in social media, because I'm sure the people that are in that listen to your podcast are from a wide range of places.
Oh, yeah.
And this may be the only possibility they have. And also your Facebook group may be the only possibility that they have of sharing on an intimate level about some of the pain that they're experiencing in going through this process of divorce. They may not feel comfortable sharing it with people in their own environment for a variety of different reasons. But it allows them at least that much of a connection with other people. And sometimes within that community, that they develop those closer relationships on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, I've always like sort of had this dream of that was something I would be able to create eventually. It's this sort of and I'm not gonna, probably should, fellas, I'm not gonna harp on this topic here, but I always dreamed of sort of the AA of divorced men. But I have found it really challenging, and I think perhaps there is a social media component in terms of logarithms of who's seeing what at what time, but I found it difficult to connect men in that larger group, to get them to come together, even if they are close. Do you think is that sort of part of this conditioning, or this way that we're raised, that we rely on women? Is that sort of entangled with that I'll call it distaste for reaching out to other men, even though you're in a group and you're sort of already reaching out, but there's that extra step of getting together with someone you don't know face to face? Do you think that's sort of entangled with that?
I think that's true. That it's one thing to be able to have a buffer between you with a two-dimensional screen, but when you get together in the same room, we can read each other's emotions better, and we reveal our own emotions better. We have micro clues on our faces that give away some of our feelings, maybe that we don't want to share, and we have that protection in this environment that we have right now.
Yeah, I want to go back to something because it just sort of hit me about how we sort of lean on women emotionally. It feels like women either are sick of that or are overwhelmed by that, because I think there's this dynamic, and I could be completely wrong and not know what the hell I'm talking about, but I feel like there's this dynamic in our society where women have fought for equality, they've fought to be in the workplace, but they've also sort of by default held on to a lot of the traditional women roles, and that this component of also being the emotional caretaker it's all starting to weigh on them. The good, bad, or indifferent. This is just the way that I see it. And I think that is part of why you're seeing 70% of divorces being filed by women. Am I on to something here, or am I out of my head?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And I shared this with my daughters. I said, when I began to write that article that you read, I said, do women feel a burden sometimes by being that special person, that only someone for everything kind of person in a person's life? And they both agreed immediately, yes. And I think at its worst, it comes out, I don't want to be your mother. That's a common thing that
Yeah.
men will hear in response to that. I think that's what women are reacting to. I've got enough to do with my kids. I don't need one more. And it feels like to them that's the way it is, because you turn to them for everything. And that dynamic is a very destructive one, I think, for a lot of women. And I mentioned in the article, that men have a lot of privileges that women don't have. But if women want men to be happier, they're going to allow us that time to share some of that burden with other people and give us some freedom to spend time with other men.
Isn't that sort of, again, I don't want to, I don't know how that might sound, but isn't that sort of like, I don't know, you wanted this equality, you wanted to join this workforce, like, I don't know, I guess the other part, part of me thinks, well, listen, I mean, you wanted this stuff, here you go. But I guess again, the other part of me says, well, it's all nuts to the death, because I think for me, my template, I'm a Gen Xer. My template was, mom pretty much stayed home. She worked a little bit, but my dad was a truck driver, so he was gone a lot. So mom did cook and cleaned and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I don't necessarily know that was my, like, you will do this. That was just my expectation, because that's what I knew. And part of me thinks, obviously, with your, women, you want this increased equality in terms of, and I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about strictly about in terms of being out in the workforce. I'm not talking about any kind of other things. Part of me says, well, you wanted all this stuff, but you got it, but no one talked to anybody about what about the stuff you were already doing. And of course, we expected you to do it because that's what we knew. And like, that's what a mom does. And that's what a wife does. And so I think there's both sides are sort of trying to figure this out. And I think for us as a men, I think we have to sort of adapt and go, okay. And I think some of us do very, very well, by the way. In terms of childcare, that kind of stuff. I think some of us really slack on it. At least I know I did in terms of the housework and those types of things. But I think there's this equalization, not necessarily in equality terms, in terms of workforce and stuff like that, but in terms of the household and the raising of the kids. I think there's this we lack this equilibrium that has it's been tough for us to find as a society. I think it's to the detriment of marriage.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Michael. My experience was a little different. My father died when I was 3, and so
Oh
my
wow.
mother was forced into the workforce when I was very young. And I always had the thought, well, if my dad had lived, then mom could have been home baking cookies for me, and would have been that traditional mother. But I don't think that my mother would have ever been really happy doing that, because she had a lot of things that she was interested in. She had a lot of talents. That carried over into my marriage. When I first married Lynn, that was both of our expectations. Was I was going to do the work, I was going to be the provider, I was going to be the protector, she was going to manage the household. That wasn't where her interests or skills were really, but it caused tension between us because I expected her to do that, and she was my someone for everything. I turned to her. She was supposed to manage our social life, our engagements, all of that stuff. All I was supposed to do was work, and that created a lot of difficulty, I think, in our marriage at that time. And it was just at the beginning of the women's movement, which was in the 1970s, and I never could really kind of understand at that time what the need for women's movement was, because I was in a household with my mother who worked, and 2 sisters who were very strong women, and I didn't understand why they needed to do what they needed to do. But I think it is very difficult because there are those basic functions of a family that need to be done somehow, and it's very difficult to manage all of that without and oftentimes in a relationship somebody has to put their career on hold a little bit in order to be able to manage that. Or if some people are fortunate, if they have the money to hire a nanny or resources to do that, but not a lot of us do. And and that creates a difficulty. And so there are things that are not going to get done. They're just not going to get done, or not going to get done in the way we want them done. Sometimes it means frozen meals instead of prepared meals, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think I was just thinking about like sort of, it typically, like they say that men are the leaders, the doers, right? Where we get shit done. That's kind of what we do, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we let the house work to them. And now it's like, well, we're also working too, but then no one, as a man, I don't know how to run a household. I'm learning now, and let me tell you, it's fucking really hard to do it by yourself. I've done it by myself, and only half the time, and it's fucking really hard. So, but so I can't take the lead on any. I don't know. Let's create a chart. I obviously I can learn all that, but it's not innate. It's not it's not natural. And so, but the women don't want to take charge. I hear a lot of women be like, "Well, you should just know," like I read their fucking mind. So it's like they don't want to take charge and say, "This is too much for me. This is what we need. Here's a plan. You do this chore, I'll do that chore." And we're not taking charge because we don't know what the fuck to do. So I don't know how to solve this. But clearly there's an issue here. Clearly there's an issue. And so I don't know if obviously it's an education piece. It's a perhaps the education piece. I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry. Perhaps the education piece is we need to educate younger generations that there needs to be a conversation around this stuff when you get into a relationship. Because I know I wasn't told that.
Yeah, and most people aren't. Falling in love is basically a psychotic experience. You don't really know who you fell in love with until after you're married for a while and you figure those things out. But ideally, I think there would be a balance. Interestingly enough, when I met Doug and we developed our relationship, in that gay relationship, there wasn't that kind of negotiation because we each did the things that we were better at. He happens to be the cook in the family, and he does all the shopping. and he's away right now, and I'm struggling. You know, what am I going to eat? You know, and I mean, I fortunately I don't have to prepare a meal for kids, but the
Yeah.
idea I'm helpless in the kitchen, and I suppose, and when I go to New Zealand, I'm thinking I'm going to be down there for a while by myself, and thinking, how am I going to survive? Because I don't know, and bottom line in them, I go, I don't want to learn how to cook, you
Yeah.
know, you know,
Yeah.
but a lot of our wives didn't want to either. You know, they fell into it by default, because we weren't expected to have to learn to cook. They were. And there's
Yeah.
a difference there, I think.
Do you think that that's changing in terms of these sort of predefined roles? Do you think that's changing now?
I think there's a move to change it, but I think that those traditional values still hold sway. I watch, the best examples I see are in my kids, who are
Like,
probably a little older than you, my kids, and they do have charts up about who's doing what and when and what their meetings are, and they seem to work it out. And But my one daughter, she and her husband are both physicians, and she didn't have to, I suppose, but she chose to put her career more on hold to take care of the family. And her husband is working a full-time job, but I think there is more awareness. I mean, I see it a lot in medicine, because when I graduated from medical school, there were no women in medicine to speak of, and now the majority, or not the majority, but more than 50% of the physicians graduating are women in most cases. So
look,
uh, but a lot of those get real burnout too.
like,
Just the idea of so many demands of how to do all of that, and really feeling burnout by trying to do too much. Something has to give, and the idea of taking time to have free time to do slow time uh,
right.
sounds almost impossible.
Yeah. So we got way off track, but let's talk about that slow time, because I feel and everyone I do it, what my version of it, um, which is usually lay on the couch and watch Netflix. Um, which I know is, we want to talk about sort of getting with other men, but my relaxation time, there are often times when I look around and I feel incredibly guilty because there's a basket of laundry that's not folded. There's a dishwasher that's not empty. There's the refrigerator could use a little bit more inventory. Um, and so how do you combat those moments of yes, like almost guilt for whatever slow time is for that man, and ideally, getting around with other man. How do you combat that sort of guilt that I think comes when you're not doing all those things that on the list that haven't been done yet?
Well, guilt really is a feeling you're doing something you shouldn't do, isn't it? And I have a whole list of those kinds of things that would be nice to have them done, but I look around the office where I am right now, and there's piles of stuff everywhere, and I know that I should go through them, but I think I'm not going to beat myself up because I haven't done it. And I think you talked about your refrigerator and the laundry. None of those things carry an urgency about them. But maybe maintaining that friendship with another person does carry a sense of urgency to combat the loneliness that we feel. And so I think it's a matter of prioritizing. If we look at our to-do list and our calendars and our checkbook, that's where we see our values. That's where we what we value. And some of those things on our to-do list are never going to get done, and it probably doesn't matter. But I think what we have to do is prioritize some that hanging out with a friend or friends, or playing poker, or playing basketball, or whatever it is that we do together, has to become a higher priority. And one of the advantages of getting older, and I think men when they hit 50, they're pretty much able to a little better work on that, because um, your career is sort of a set. You're not really going to climb a lot more ladders at that point. And a lot of the family responsibilities are beginning to diminish. And so your time is more freed up to do some of that. So aging helps. And that's why I wrote one article
Really?
that it really just exploded on Psychology Today about how if you want to be happy, think like an old person. And the idea is that old people have a different sense of time and values and priorities, and we have an urgency about time because we see that there's a diminishing amount of time ahead in our lives. And so we begin to think, what are the choices I'm going to make with that time? And a lot of the things that we thought were important were, and it's not just things, but people as well as activity. All those things, begin to sort themselves out a lot as you get older, and you think, I don't have time for that anymore. Um, uh, the last chapter in my most recent book is called "Aging Allows Us to Say Fuck Off," and I think just tell your laundry to fuck off.
I'm using that.
Yeah.
I'm using that.
You can pull the dirty or the wrinkled clothes out of the laundry and wear them. I've done it certainly, but I think one of the things that I like to talk about that to help people deal with aging is the issue of, you can either measure time or you can experience time. And throughout my early 40s and that period of my life, I was rushing from meeting to meeting. I had appointment after appointment. And then when I through the divorce, I had to make enough money to be able to support myself and support my ex-wife and my kids. And there were all those pressures to do those things together, and I didn't have any time to spare during that time. And I could get through it for a period of time, but we get caught up in that. And I think another thing that comes to mind as we talk about this, Michael, is Americans think about work much differently than any other country I've ever been in. People say we live to work. In other countries, they work to live. Have you ever talked to a Canadian who would ever sell back vacation time to their boss? No, it doesn't happen. And people will retire at a certain age and say, "Well, I've been selling back 2 years of vacation time." It's like, what the fuck is that about?
I can agree. My boss is Canadian, funny enough.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying he likes to work during his vacation sometimes, but he takes them. I mean, he'll go to fucking where was he at? Venice, Italy. Earlier in the year, he'd still jump on some calls, but he was in Venice, so he was in a lot better position than me.
One of the things that I like to talk about too is we think too much about retiring at 55 or 60 or 65. Like I said, I'm 80 years old and I'm still working. I think what we ought to do is borrow some of that retirement time, put it into our lives when we're younger, and plan to work a couple extra years in our life to pay for that time back. And I think it makes sense. I mean, one of the things that happens now is many of us I suppose many in my age group are still working, but a lot of people work past 70. And it's not a bad thing, because you can work part-time, or you can supplement your income in various ways like that. It really, if you're doing hard labor, that's kind of hard to do that. But there are positions available, and I think we're too focused on beating the shit out of our life until we get to that point of retirement. Then we're going to start enjoying ourselves. That's crazy thinking. We need to begin to rethink that particular value. There was in the movie Florence Foster Jenkins. There's a wonderful line in there, and the guy said, he was an actor, and his career had never taken off, and he was getting to be an older actor, and he said, "It's not so bad. I'm freed from the tyranny of ambition." And I
Right.
think that the idea that once we get to midlife, when I was 50, I thought, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I've gone about as far as I can go, and initially I was kind of depressed by that. It kind of bothered me to think there was no hill to climb. And then I came to peace with it and thought, well, now I can begin to take more time off. I can begin to do all of these other things. And then the last book I wrote is called No More Neckties. And when my mother died when I was about 60, and I decided I would never go to a networking cocktail party again because I didn't need to, and why would I go if I don't like those people? Many of them. I decided that I would never sit through a boring lecture because I'd done enough of that, feeling like I couldn't ever skip, and I might need something I'd learned there, even though it was awful to listen to it. So I even told the minister at the church I was going to, I said, if your sermon's not good, I'm not staying.
Uh, uh, well,
And
that
then
speaks to I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it hit me while you were talking. That speaks to like the wisdom that comes with age, right?
yeah.
Like you've learned this over the years, and so I want to take it back even further because you talked about, and boy, do I feel your pain here, or what you've experienced. I can relate to is being a single father and working and having to provide and paying for things that you no longer have family, but you're still paying for one, right? And like that burden of that, and the how much it feels like a defeat, but clearly, and you can speak to this, that passes, right? Like there was a day where you no longer had to pay child support or alimony, whatever it was, right? You got through that. Can you speak about that? Can you talk about sort of your mind frame and how difficult that was, and or maybe it was easy, or how did you? Because I'm in the thick of it, man, and there are days when I'm like, fuck it, I'm just gonna quit and disappear, and good luck on finding it, because it's really fucking hard, and there are just days I just don't want to do it. That doesn't not be suicide. I just want to go live in a fucking cabin.
No. I think it's okay to talk about suicide because I do think a lot of people in this situation do think about suicide.
Sure.
There's an Australian psychiatrist who talks about predicament suicide, and predicament suicide he defined as someone who doesn't have any mental illness, but they're caught in a situation where there's no good option. There's either a bad option or a worse option, and a lot of times that sense of hopelessness is what we experience during that time that you're talking about, and I certainly went through that. Having lost my father when I was very young, I had grown up with the idea I'm always going to be the best father I can possibly be. And being a divorced father who sees his kids on Wednesdays and weekends is not the dream I had about who I was going to be. So there was a lot of shame and guilt about that, walking away from that. And there were some real regrets about that. And, when I got divorced, another divorced doctor had come up to me and said, well, it takes about 5 years to recover. And that was sort of right on, although at the end of 5 years, then I began having college expenses as well as. So even though the alimony didn't last and the child support didn't last, then I had college expenses to come up with too. So it went on, and but I did learn to live more simply. when I was first divorced, I had a place, and I had an air mattress on the floor, and I had a cooler for a refrigerator, and I had an old desk, and that was it in my place. I had, but I did buy a painting. And I had to pay for it on time, but it was a painting of a big rooster, big blue rooster. And I thought, this guy has some stamina and strength and everything that I thought I needed. And I still love that painting because it was, for me, it was a sign of hope. This is who I can be. This is who I can become. This is how I can get through that. And the other part of it that complicates it, of course, is that there's all that conflict between you and your spouse around these issues, and I certainly went through that with my wife at the time. I remember once I exploded on her because I went to pick up the kids, and she was wearing a sweatshirt I'd given my daughter, and it was like, it's like it wasn't a big deal, but for me it was a huge deal to see her thinking, I bought that sweatshirt. I'm sending you all this money. Why the fuck can't you wear your own clothes? you know, you know? And I look back on it now, but I think we need that anger to disengage.
Really.
Gives us the energy to say this was the right decision. I needed to be out of this relationship, so we really needed that. And then later you can begin to work on the forgiveness that needs to come to begin to try and have some rapprochement with your spouse, and that takes some time to do that. Fortunately, Len and I were able to do that. We began that process when our first daughter got married, and since then, now my ex-wife and my husband are friends. Which we went out for dinner one night, and with some old friends of mine, and Doug was there, and my ex-wife was there because she knew the friends too. And I said to the server, "Well, this is my husband and this is my wife." He looked at me like, "What?" And then he was like, "Oh, now I get it."
But can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how could you have thought of it any sooner than you did? It sounds like it took you a very long time. Do you think if you would have been conscious and like, okay, I'm gonna work on forgiveness, I'm gonna work on having a good relationship with her, do you think it was even possible?
Early on, it really wasn't. During the first, probably, I mean, we fought about the same issues we fought about when we were married, usually money. And I think they may have been the catalyst for the anger. But I think you have to get rid of that anger first, and not hold on to it, because it can really eat you up. And I like to tell people that the reason we have no fault before is because there's no point in, if you were the one who screwed up, blaming yourself. You need to forgive yourself. And if the other person you feel it doesn't do any good to continue to batter them with whatever they did, just accept that it was kind of a no fault situation. And there's a whole exercise you can take in forgiveness, and part of it needs to be to begin to understand what the other person was experiencing at the time. In my case, for me to begin to recognize that life wasn't working out so well for my wife either. During that period of time, she was trying to fit into a mold that didn't work for her. She began a professional career after that and became a much happier person in many ways. It wasn't working for me, and I was blaming myself. I needed to forgive myself as well. And I think forgiveness is a gift you give someone who doesn't deserve it. Sometimes it's yourself, sometimes it's someone else. But you really need to work through the anger first, and then begin to try and develop empathy and compassion for the other person in the relationship. And that's what happened when our daughter got married. We were able to come together and recognize that, there were some good parts of our relationship. It wasn't all bad. We entered it with the right reasons. It just didn't work for us for a long time.
you think, and I think, yeah, you gotta get rid of the anger, and I'm not there. And I think because for me, and I know the guys listening, it's because the anger inducing things keep continuing to come up. So, for instance, you know, my ex gets $1,000 every month, right? Every month, and sometimes, and when they're asked for more money or money short, but I always feel like broke, even though I've made six figures, it still feels like it's never enough. So it's hard for me to, I don't know how to work through that if I'm maybe not constantly, but frequently for sure. Basically, I know it's on me to react, right? It's on me to the situation different, to frame it differently. But before it's really, really hard. So I guess my question is like, how do you work through your anger when you're still facing situations that make you angry?
Well, they do trigger it again. I guess this is a good place to go back to talking about the friends that we need to support us during that time. People who will listen to us. Now, we can burn out our friends too by going on too long about it and bitching about it. But sometimes they can give us some feedback and say, hey, wait a minute, your anger is out of proportion here. All she asked for was an extra $100. Instead of exploding as if you were going to have to go be homeless and living on the street, but other friends can help give us that perspective. What happens, Michael, though, is if you sit alone too much and think about it, you chew on that and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And where do you take that anger? And particularly if you don't share it with somebody, it just begins to feel explosive inside. And at times that's a good time. And women do this much better than we do as men. Women will call a friend and say, I need to go to lunch. And they'll sit there across the table from each other and they'll listen to each other and they'll look eye to eye and maybe the friend will say, oh, sweetheart, you're overreacting here. Men don't do that. We just don't call a friend and say, I'm feeling like shit. I need to talk to somebody. Can you do it? I think it isn't even necessary to call that friend and say, I feel like shit. It's possible to say, let's just go for a bike ride together and hang out. And just that being active and doing something with another person helps distract us from that pain so that it doesn't continue to evolve and grow bigger and bigger all the time.
Is there this one? I've been struggling with this lately in terms of venting my anger and frustration, and also sort of getting sick of talking about it, but yet still feeling the need. You know what I mean? Where is the line? Because sometimes I feel like it's either fucking do something about it or shut up. But I know, right? But I know that there's a need for preventing. At least I think so. I think it's helping to get things out, whether that be journaling or talking to other folks or whatever. But get it out, I think, is important. But where's the line, if there is, or maybe it's just such a personal thing where you stop complaining and accept and or make a change?
I don't know that there's a line because I think it's more like waves, where you'll feel better for a while and then something little will happen, like the sweatshirt I mentioned. It'll just come back at you full blast. I really like journaling. And one of the ways that I tell patients and friends to do that is to do a stream of consciousness journaling, where you write everything you can write, all the piss, all the anger, all the pus, get it out and down on a piece of paper. And then when you've kind of emotionally exhausted that process, then begin to take an analytic approach, because you're using two different sides of your brain, basically. You want to feel that emotion, you want to understand it, but then as you've exhausted that process, then you begin to say, okay, where are my feelings out of proportion? What are the steps I can take? What can I do to make this better? You begin to do a more analytic process, but you can't do the things together. And I tell people, journal as fast as you can. This is not a book report. You don't have to turn it in for a grade. This is just for you. It can be pictures, it can be diagrams, it can be filled with profanity, misspelled words. It doesn't really matter. You just want to do it as fast as you possibly can. And then you say, hey, wait a minute. Let's take a look at this. And when I was going through the process of my divorce, I did a lot of that. In fact, I only burned that journal a while back because I thought I don't want to die and have my kids see what I was writing then, you know.
Thinking that, yeah.
and it does help. It's really based on some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, and all those techniques are there's evidence to they're evidence-based processes that really can help talk you down from the ledge.
We definitely got way off track. So let's with all good stuff. It was awesome. I really appreciate it. Let's touch on one last topic, and then we'll do the words of wisdom question. But how do you make friendship a priority? Like, what does that look like? Is that, I'm gonna every Saturday I'm gonna go with my buddy, or every other Saturday, or what? How do you do that? What are the ways and the method that ensure that you're making friendship a priority?
Well, some people are better at it than others. I think oftentimes it's a matter of going to a group with a shared interest, and being a part of that. I mean, friendships often begin that way, but it's not necessary to take a deep dive into every kind of social situation. It can be, politics. It can be church. If people have some basis for religion, getting involved in that. Volunteering could be something, because you usually choose to volunteer in areas that you have some shared interests on. Physical activities can be a good one, that kind of thing, and not approaching it as if you're searching for a best friend. That can make you look desperate. It's like trying to find a new spouse to fill the void. You look needy, and nobody wants to have a needy friend. But I think pursuing a shared interest, but being disciplined about it in terms of putting some time in your calendar for whatever that's going to be, and making a habit of doing it, and a certain amount of time. I think that's one of the reasons the AA groups work for people, is they find a sense of community within a certain group of people, and it meets at a certain time, and they do that. I have a group of people who play dominoes with, and we have a coffee group. We have those things, and we don't always meet at the same time every week or a month, but we do have an intent to find a time to do it, and we do it every month. And so I think it's really valuing and recognizing the value of these things enough to put off sorting the laundry and emptying the refrigerator and doing those kinds of things that are ideally would be done, but they're probably not as important.
I agree. I think, like many things, it's intention that's almost most important. Like I have the intention, I want to make my friendships a priority, or I want to get over this anger, or whatever it is. It has to be an intention. Otherwise, you're never gonna make any real changes.
Yeah.
You have to be intentional. So, Dr. Loren, thank you so much.
Accept the validity of the anger, and don't beat yourself up about feeling that way. The idea is to put a lid on it at some point and say, enough's enough. This is hurting me more than it's hurting anybody else. And by hanging on to this bitterness, it's only affecting me. It's not affecting, if you're pissed off at your spouse for having ruined your life or whatever it is, it's not hurting her at all. It only comes back to hurt you. And at some point, it's time to let go of that and say, okay, that part of it's done. And I'm going to move on and begin to rebuild from here.
Yeah, you're right. It's just so hard sometimes.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, but again, thank you, Dr. Loren, for doing this. I really appreciate it. The last question I ask everybody is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just beginning his divorce journey?
I would say get rid of the shame and guilt that you feel about it, and stop blaming yourself. Work on stopping blaming your wife. Try and let go of the bitterness that you feel. It's not necessary to hate your ex-spouse. That's not a critical part of the recovery. I would say stop measuring time all the time and experience time. Look toward ways of experiencing time with friends, or even just doing things you want. Downsize a little. We're driven sometimes to take care of all these things that we think we have to have. You don't need a lot of stuff. And, I know how to live poor because I've done it. I can live poor again, and I won't be less happy by living without all of the things that I thought I had to have. And finally, I would say, learn to say fuck off.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end it. Thank you much, sir, for doing this. What's the best way for people to find you and your books and your blog and all that kind of good stuff?
Well, you can find me on Psychology Today under Loren Olson. My website is nomorenecktiesbook.com. Or you can just Google my name and it'll show up. But I'd love to hear from people who I've made touch with, and maybe some of them will even become a friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching and/or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.